But I think there's a real, I see a real change in that we're working together a lot more effectively. So, I've only been with CSIRO for 3.5 years, and 3 years ago, I talked to a company or my staff, and they talk about projects that they were doing, and they were real fee-for-service projects. Some of them, not all of them. And I'd go, well, why are we doing this work? Or I'd say to the company, we're not interested in doing this work. We're interested in doing research and innovative work.
In today's episode, I'm speaking with Sandra Occhipinti, Research Director of the Discovery Program Mineral Resources at CSIRO. Now, Sandy and I have never really met in person, but our paths recently crossed through both of our connections with the Australian Geoscience Council. So because I don't really know Sandy that well, our discussion starts with a bit of her background, as I really enjoy listening to how people got into their profession and what drives them and how they got to where they got today. And if that part of the conversation is not fast-paced enough for you, then feel free to skip ahead. But I've noticed as I'm getting into more of these talks that most of our listeners actually really enjoy these stories, and particularly our younger viewers might get some inspiration from them. What I really wanted to kick around with Sandy in this talk is to understand what CSIRO does. Sandy runs through some of the amazing discoveries and inventions they've come up with over the years. And we talk about products like portable BBB, data mosaic, and photon assaying. We really focus on the importance of acknowledging failure as part of the discovery process, and we explore how her planning process works and how to measure success. I asked Sandy how CSIRO keeps track of what others are doing elsewhere in the world and how the centre of gravity in R&D and mining is perhaps shifting away from Australia, and what we need to do to address this. Of course, I asked what is the next discovery on the horizon and what new things are going to make explorers' lives easier in the future. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. I learned a lot from Sandy, and if there's anything I've left on the table here, then please let me know in the comments. So we may be able to circle back to this in a future discussion. Let's get into it. Hey Sandy, how are you going?
I'm good, thanks.
Hey, good to see you, but as I was preparing for the talk, I realised we've only just recently really connected through the AGC. I don't think our networks have really, obviously both geologists, but I don't think we've ever sort of come across each other in the industry, and I'm always interested in people's background. I read a little bit about your career, and I think both of our families come from Europe, so I was wondering what drew you into geology. And I think I read, and clarify if I got it wrong, but you didn't really quite know what you wanted to do, but you got into geology, and as you hear quite often, one thing led to another and ended up quite firmly into rock world. So I'm always interested to hear about how people decided to get into geology and then all the way to where you're sitting now. Do you mind taking us on a bit of a journey there?
Yeah, so I'm from a farming background, and my parents, my family's originally from Sicily, so really purely Sicilian. They're from different regions. My mum was actually born in Australia, but only just. But the families were from different regions. And as a result of that, they spoke different languages, really.
Oh, cool.
So I never learned how to speak their dialects, and they didn't speak anything that resembled Italian. They tell me. I have no idea, really. So I'm very much Australian with all of that. But I think being from... so I'll get to how I got into geology in a second, but I think being from a farming background put me in good stead to be a geologist. I was a field geologist for many, many years, and I'm not afraid of being outside, and I quite like it, really. So that's how I sort of, once I was exposed to it, that's how I got into it. But the way I got into it was a bit unusual. I was quite okay at high school, and I, at the end of year 12, I decided to do arts because I'd done science all through school, and I really loved English literature and drama, and so I wanted to do drama and literature at university.
Oh.
But my teachers got really upset when I put my preferences down. So in those days, you actually you had to sort of mail a preference list through the school to the unit, to, I don't know, whatever the group was that you mailed it to. And when your results came in, you would be told whether or not you got into your first or second preference or whatever, and there was no fully going back from that. You got in somewhere or you didn't, basically. Anyway, because I was so upset, I put Monash Science first as my first preference, and the rest were arts, Caulfield Arts, blah arts, such and such arts, all over Victoria, I think.
Yeah.
I got into science, and I remember ringing my best friend at the time and saying to her I got into science, and she said, "That's so bad." So I was really upset. But, you know, I'm someone that finishes what I start. So I went and enrolled. And when I went to enroll, the person at the desk, there was Bob Gregory. So he's Professor Bob Gregory now, I imagine, or he is. And he taught geology, first year geology. And he said, you know, what do you want to do? And I go, I don't know, a bit of chemistry. Maybe I said, I really don't want to do physics anymore. Maybe some maths. I've never done biology. Maybe I'll do some biology. Yeah. And he said, well, what about geology? And I didn't even know what it was. And I just said, yeah, why not? And that's how I got started in it. And I found that I was quite good at it, probably because of the storytelling aspect of geoscience, really. Just getting those little bits of clues together and then having to put together a tangible story around it. It's not like some of the other sciences where they're more like you have a hypothesis and you're testing the hypotheses. We go about and we collect clues and build a story.
Yeah.
And I really loved it, basically. So I finished.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because we were talking, I've been talking to other people about how they got into it, and, you know, I think at one point we were discussing it as, you know, we get paid to solve puzzles, basically, right? I mean, it's not, every day is different, and it's that quest and storytelling we've talked about, because I'm not sure you follow, Hayden Moore's Geologize, but, you know, it's all about this outreach and this advocacy, right? And it's about storytelling, and geologists are excellent storytellers. So with arm waving included, so I can see how that was an appeal. But then, so, you know, how then? Well, if you're in Australia, you're a geologist. Chances are, I guess, you end up in the mining industry. But was that a deliberate choice as well, or?
Not to begin with. So I wanted to become a mapping geologist because I liked to be the one to tell the story the first time. I guess maybe you have to be a bit of a jack of all trades when you do that as well. So I wanted to be a regional mapping geologist. So I joined the Geological Survey of Western Australia. I was really lucky to get a job in a survey back then. That was 1994, after I finished my master's. And, you know, I worked there for quite a while, for about 7 years, and then I got a bit, it became all a bit the same, the work that I was doing. I felt that I needed to learn a bit more, and I didn't think I would gain it from staying in that job. So I went back to university. And then after doing the whole PhD thing, I had a real rethink about where I needed to go in this space to make a difference and what my end goal might be. So I decided that I should get into economic geology at that point, and that took me on a journey which led me into the minerals industry through Fugro Airborne Surveys, first of all, and then into Anglo Gold Ashanti. So and I became, I'm still a structural geologist, I guess, really, but a bit more focused on that economic side was that's what I had decided to do because I wanted to make a difference, really.
Yeah, that's interesting because we didn't set this up, but as a structural geologist myself, all I ever wanted to do is get paid to map. I was talking to Mike Stewart about this the other day, exactly that, and he told me about his entry into the industry as a resource geologist, and indeed he mapped for years. And as we were joking, if somebody paid me lunch, I'll go out and map somewhere because that's really why we get into it. And it's interesting because it's not that easy anymore to get paid to map, if that's what you call it. You have to be really, really good. at what you do and be prepared to, to be out there for a number of weeks, out in the sticks in the wild. And that's not for everybody if you want to mix that with family life and so on. So again, as I was discussing with some others, you end up wanting to do 3D modeling, resource geology, because you can still play with structure a little bit. And you can still go to sites and be in the field, but you can pick and choose a little bit. But interesting, because I had the same recognition, I guess, when I came to New Zealand. I wanted to map. I do it for free, basically, but I got in touch with economic geology, so it sounds like a bit of a similar story. Never look back, because it's, there's not a day that goes by that's the same and where there's not a new challenge somewhere, particularly from a service perspective. But so obviously, you worked for some larger companies then. What drew you to the research side? How did you, obviously, having done a PhD, you probably have that then in your blood, and that continuous quest must be something, that drives that there. But now you're working with CSIRO. Was that always an aspiration, or is that was that another sort of left field and like, oh, actually now this brings me all the way back full circle, and this is what I really wanted to do for such a long time? Or what?
After my foray into industry, I joined the Centre for Exploration Targeting at UWA, and I did that because at the time in the gold, it's Anglo Gold Ashanti, so very focused on gold, which is great. But I thought I'd like to learn about other commodities, and there was a mineral systems job going at CET, and I thought, well, I'd give that a go. And so that's what drew me back into research. It wasn't by design, I don't think, at that point, but I did make sort of, in my thought process of going through that, I deliberately sort of worked through the whole thing and thought, well, if I've come from a survey background and I've done a bit of, I've done my PhD, so I've got that sort of tick, done the industry stuff. After this job, I can either go back into industry, again, as a technical specialist perhaps, or I could continue a journey in academia if it's feasible to do so. But, I didn't go in with my eyes closed. It's very difficult to get a position in a university. It wasn't really by design. And I don't know if what I do now you call research, because I'm a research director now.
Sure.
And I do very little research myself, really. It's more around directing the research and setting the strategic direction for that research to go off into the future. But I just want to circle back to something you said earlier about being a structural geologist and wanting to map. I think times have changed a bit as well, though, now, because we're doing so much exploration through cover. There's really no point spending long periods of time in the field. You obviously want to go ground truth, your interpretations and that kind of thing. But, that's what I found even while I was working with Anglo and Fugro, is that it's really was about using the data that was available, coming up with, at that point, actually, it is like coming up with a hypothesis in a way, and then going out and starting to test it by identifying areas where there are rock or samples that you can then access. So I think you can still be a structural geologist and perhaps not not have to be out there for as long as we originally were. But
well, structural geology is broad, obviously, and most of my friends, if not all of them, back in Holland ended up in the oil and gas industry, and I always joke I couldn't be asked to sit there and stare at some white and black squiggly lines and with my blue crayons come up with folds, and that wasn't really that exciting, and I'm probably underselling it a little bit, but the mapping, it depends on where you are, obviously, as well, and at what level you're working. Structural geology has I've got actually the microtectonics by Peschier on the table here as a bit of a prop, but that's sort of the micro, and it goes all the way up to large scale, and different people have different focus. So I talked to Brett Davis the other day, who's out in the field doing a lot of this kind of work, really interesting. And then you've got the June Cohens who really look at it from a digital perspective. And, we all bring our little bit to it, but the connection to me, back to your farm equivalent, was I wanted to be out in the field as well. That was it. If you can be out in the field, breathing fresh air and climbing mountains and getting paid for it, then I always get really jealous if I see Canadian geologists about what they're doing. They're posting pictures on social media about helicopter supported mapping. That's fantastic. And but yeah, it is different, and it is harder to find ground that hasn't already been mapped 10 times over. And 80 years ago, they made some pretty damn fine maps, right? They knew their rocks, and they knew how to map. So a lot of the people that I know now that do this work are doing it in Africa or areas that are perhaps or just opening up. But yeah, it is different. And I'd love to do more structural geology, but and indeed. I mean, like you said, as a director of research, you don't do research, and I run a consultancy, and I always try to find a balance because I love doing the technical work.
Yes, so do I. So it's really hard, isn't it, to find those opportunities? And I find that I'm starting to find those opportunities in new opportunities. So, at the moment, we're looking at mineral carbonation. So, so very different to what I have done before, but really important as well. And rather than going and asking everybody else to do something, I sort of put my hands in as well, just to sort of get something started, which is really fun actually. I don't really know about the architecture of CSIRO, to be honest. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who've worked there, but I've been there once. Well, which one? Because we've got 52 offices. Or something.
Yeah, well, the one in Perth, Oscar Ronan was still working there, I think, before he went back to Snowdon, and caught up with him there, and that was my first time there, and it was all new to me because I come a little bit left field to the industry. I mean, I knew what pyrite was when I finished my degree. Well, yeah, I'm joking, but it wasn't really no mineral focus whatsoever, right? It's that's not the Dutch school. So it was interesting to be in that building and actually hear about what CSIRO does and all the various research work going on. Recently, we were talking about Detect Ore because we work very closely together with Olympus. We rent out their instruments, pardon me. We rent out their instruments, and they'd done a deal with Detect Ore. And I remember going to a talk by CSIRO people 3, 4, 5 years ago when that was just being developed, and I was like, wow, where is this coming from? And that must be quite rewarding, right? Because you're actually really fundamentally adding value to the industry in a discovery process. So.
Yeah, so that's what is attractive about CSIRO for me. So having worked in sort of government, industry and academia, I can sort of see CSIRO being a vehicle to take those learnings and things that are happening even in that space now, and actually but funnel it into a way that can be used by the community. And our community is big users of our technologies and our knowledge is the minerals industry. It really that's what CSIRO does. It's this sort of bubble between industry and academia. The idea, everything we do here, we do think about whether or not it will add to some knowledge, a methodology, a technology that can eventually be commercialised or taken out into the industry and used routinely. So that's where we get our big impact from.
Yeah, and where do you decide where and how do you decide that you're barking up the wrong tree? Because there must be projects that you're sort of into, it's multi-year, and there's so many unknown unknowns because it's research. You work with a budget, you work with outcomes. You talked about strategic vision. I mean, there's a bunch of projects in a pipeline, I'm guessing, and people are working on it. And it'd be hard to say, we'll figure this one out by such and such date. I mean, I'm just thinking aloud here, but how difficult is that? Is anybody at some point after 10 years of working on something, folks, I think we need to let this one go? Does that live at all, or am I just?
Yeah, so that's really interesting you should ask, because it's something that we've been discussing internally about fast fails and just not being afraid of failure. So there is a real culture, I think, just generally in science, not just geoscience, where people don't talk about their failures.
Yeah.
And the result of that is that we do them again. Okay, like so there have been instances where I've sort of said, well, didn't someone try that 15 years ago? What's the difference now? Have we got new technologies? Are we using different instrumentation or different vessels to, to deal with the gas or whatever? And they'll go, no, we don't, or yes, we do. So no, we don't. Why are we doing it? It's just write a paper, say that it failed. Let's get that knowledge out there. But so the way we do it now is that we're taking quite high risks now within the discovery program, and Oscar, you were talking about just before. He was part of my program basically. I think in the past there'd be a lot of strategic work within CSIRO, so government funded for a long period of time, and then maybe try to spin it out into industry. And that's kind of where Detector fit. Once it got to a particular technology readiness level, we put out an EOI. It was before I joined the group. They put out an EOI, and portable PPB was successful, and they took that out. What we're doing now is a bit less of that, and we will take industry on us on a journey of discovery, basically. So we think we'll get something together and think there's something in this. Get a bunch of sponsors in, or work with a few different groups, and try it. And we tell them this is research and development. So one of the examples around that is ultrafines or ultrafines plus. So that's that clay sort of geochem that Ryan Noble is leading, and we've partnered with LabWest. So we've basically licensed the methodology to LabWest. So we've gone with a company. It was reasonably high risk, really, to begin with. We've brought in, I don't know, 20 or 30 sponsors into that project initially, and basically doing the geochem across Australia and New Zealand. I think actually there's parts of New Zealand where we got samples as well. An offshoot of that particular program, which we didn't predict, was that we've developed a machine learning mechanism to map landscapes. So to domain the landscape so that we can interpret the geochemistry from those landscape domains more accurately. And that is really high value. But we didn't see that coming. And if those companies hadn't have come on board with us, they wouldn't know it existed.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win, really. So that we're trying to do that more and more now within the program. Of course, we're limited to the number of things like that we can do. But we've got, 85 to 90 staff at any one time. So we are running quite a number of these sorts of projects.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, because the I guess the way every project works, whether it's for an exploration company or a service company, there must be some sort of measurable outcome to this. And if you're talking about measuring success here, there's got to be some sort of feedback loop. Like if some of these new ideas have commercial offtake, that's a real clear indicator of a successful program, and to see those deals coming out. But is that at any point brought into that process, as in, there is funding from the government, and does there need to be a demonstrable return, or is it just R&D and whatever happens, happens?
No, we need to have a demonstrable return, really. But it doesn't need to be a return on money or return on investment exactly. The demonstrable return might be that a new company started and they employed 20 people or something like that. There needs to be some sort of impact. And I think great impact is what Portable PPB are doing. They've got a factory basically that they've built with an R&D facility.
A great success story. Yeah,
great success story. They've employed a number of staff. They've got they've built all their widgets. They've got their testing kits, field kits to be sent out, mini kits, and the max.
We can't wait to run with it. I was talking to Todd Houlihan the other day, and we were just both kids being really excited about a new technology putting out there, and I've seen some people already using it and talking very positively around it. But that might actually be an interesting point to touch on, because there is a sense of conservatism in our industry that is fairly frustrating to observe sometimes, right? I mean, whether it's something simple that's a little bit more in my wheelhouse, like implicit modeling, why wouldn't you use that as long as you do it smartly? It's been 19 years since it's been discovered, but we're still being so clunky with a number of interpretations that I just wonder, why aren't we all using that? And I'm guessing from where you're sitting, sometimes you come up with all these wonderful things and not enough people are using it. Is there any outlet push? Is there a balcony from which to shout all the advancement, or either people will pick it up or they don't? Are you pleased with portable PPB's uptake, I guess, of a new product? But take data mosaic, for instance, right? If I look at that, I go, that's fantastic. I mean, surely it's just an algorithm, right? So, I mean, groups like IOGuess and all those, and Leapfrogs and all those folks, they should be building that in tomorrow, because it can't be more than a few pages of code, surely. And we need to all be doing that, right? I'm probably completely on this.
So I think it's about 10,000 lines of code. It's sometimes difficult in our industry not to get frustrated, but it takes 10 years to change something in any industry, and we have to be a little bit patient. I think the best way of getting stuff out there is actually through working with SMEs. So at the moment, actually, around Data Mosaic, we're working with an SME around licensing Data Mosaic into their business model, and hopefully that they will take it out and their clients will use it. We've actually just put it has been a web app for a while, and we've just started we've started selling it for the first time, actually.
I saw that, yeah.
You see that? $5, I think.
Yeah, $5. So I saw that. I was like, is there a comma missing, or?
No. It's to test the platform, the payment platform, really. Yeah. But even after that, we're trying to keep it quite cheap, really. Sure. Because we want people to use it. And we're also going to build into it. So Data Mosaic that you see today, it'll always be there, but there'll be other parts coming into Data Mosaic. So it's going to be our downhole logging tool, basically, is what we're looking at it as. So there's a new bit of ML that will be added to it, hopefully, in the next 12 months or so. And then again, another one, so we've got actually plans for the next couple years out for that software. But of course, we use it internally, so we don't want to stop supporting it, because we actually use it when we work with a company. We'll use Data Mosaic. We see other possibilities in using that code as well internally. And if we wind the clock back a number of years, there's the spectral geologist, which we have, and that's bizarre. It's bizarre. It's great. It's not bizarre. It's great software to sort of eke out that mineralogy from your spectra. Yeah. In theory, it can be used on any spectra, any types of spectra at all, and we're continually building up those libraries. And it's quite popular. We sell many licenses of that software globally. Yeah. The way we do it is we sell it via on-sellers. We have people that we're connected to. We license them to be able to sell that software to their clients, essentially. And then we just receive a royalty back into CSIRO.
So that's the model,
we don't really have the capacity in my team to do that work. And I don't want my research scientists doing that. I want them building libraries and that kind of thing. Yeah.
That obviously a model that works, right? And there's a few years of experience in that team as well, right, with demonstrable success. And I mean, I don't think many other countries can claim a research house that adds that much value to this particular industry. So it's and that's maybe another line of question. I mean, it must be hard, or maybe it's easy to find the right people to come on board, right? Because as I'm sure your business is the same as mine, it's about the people that work in it. And we talked about education, and obviously that's a bit of a crossover with the AGC, and we can talk about how it's dwindling and all the rest of it, but I've got too many conversations on that topic already. But that must be, is it becoming harder to find good people to come in? Because,
No.
perhaps the same as the gap between the rich and the poor, is it the 1% and they're becoming smaller and smaller, or is it more people knocking on the door? You don't have to actually go and find them.
Look, it's difficult to find geophysicists, I would say, in terms of finding people to come in. So geophysicists are hard. Having said that, we have recently employed, I think, 2 new geophysicists into the team, which is great, and we're actually going to look for another one very shortly. We don't tend to find it that difficult to attract people to apply for jobs in CSIRO. I'm not sure why that is, but when we advertise a position, we get a lot of applicants. So they're very heavy cuts. And you might see coming up soon, we're going to, CSIRO started to advertise in different ways as well to attract people into the agency. One way is a direct advertising, where we sort of say that we've got this job and we're advertising it, like that's just, what we've always done. And then the other one is doing these campaigns. And the latest campaign, I think, is called Impossible Without You, or something like that.
That's a nice ring to it.
Or Possible With You, or something.
Yeah.
I think one of those.
I'll look it up. Put a link in the description.
But it's so we will be advertising for people that can work in critical minerals soon. And some of those people will connect back to us within discovery or into processing or other parts of the minerals value, the mining value chain, basically. So through those programs, there's hundreds of people that apply for positions, but there are lots of jobs that come with those campaigns as well. So it's definitely worth applying.
Luxury problem.
It's a great problem to have, I think. Having too many applicants sometimes.
And does that all that hiring happen at your desk, or is that sort of a group effort?
Oh, no, I can't do it all. So definitely doesn't all happen at my desk. So usually we just have,
from a technical perspective. I mean, you've got HR, obviously. I mean, but from a technical perspective, are you involved with those? Yeah.
Our engineers and scientists are involved in the hiring. So they're the ones they're the decision makers in the hiring. And every now and then I'll sit on a hiring committee, but I try to limit that to a couple a year, basically. For me, I might set the role description with the staff, but I try to make sure that people have the autonomy to make the decision on who they're going to work with. So what we find is we get really capable people applying for these positions. We're looking for people that can, to quote actually someone else that said this recently, I can't remember who it was exactly. They said, we want people that almost have that childlike, they have maintained that childlike, curiosity, playful sense where they want to learn more, right? Yeah. Because our industry is changing. It's changing so quickly, and we need to be ready for that change. We don't want to attract people in that say, well, I've always worked on lead zinc and that's what I do. It's great. Right. On lead zinc, just imagine what you could do with copper, right? It could also be that you've worked on lead zinc, you know something about basins. Let's have a look at sequestering carbon into those basins, So they're the types of people that we're trying to attract in, people with that curiosity, that want to innovate, are happy to work in a team, as a team environment. So just sort of all boots in. Yeah.
Wow. So are you looking for, the team is expanding, as you say, so should we say, if people are listening, geophysicists out there, but you have to work with Mr. Austin, which might be, is James still there, or is he still?
Jim's here. So he's in our Linfield office. He's just employed 2 new staff. So
I should catch up with him. Terrible sense of music. You should tell him that. So he's
I don't want to upset him.
No, I'm joking. It's quite aligned to mine, actually, but I always like catching up with him. I mean, geophysics is not really my wheelhouse, and it is hard to find good ones, and a lot of them are working in consultancies, and It's
They're very
difficult.
busy people.
Yeah,
Jeff.
very busy.
And,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and it's also, it's obviously not a one size fits all kind of model. So it depends on what you're looking for at the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Really.
yeah.
So we're doing a lot of work in petrophysics, which is what Jim's been doing as well with their petrophysical lab. And also that building that relationship between petrophysics and geophysics. And of course, in the exploration through cover space, we're looking much deeper now. So we're actually looking for people that can delve a lot deeper.
So maybe explain that. I mean, what do you see the next 20 years going to then? I mean, look in the crystal ball. I mean, you obviously got, I mean, I don't need you to go into all the secret squirrel stuff that's happening behind the scenes, but I mean, everybody's talking about undercover, all bodies are harder to find, blah, blah, blah. We know this, but what game-changing discoveries, and what's the area that we need to look at? I mean, we talk ourselves silly here as well. Everybody talks about machine learning, and I'm getting a little bit sick and tired of it sometimes, but it's clearly, it's working in some places, but it's not the be-all, end-all solution to everything. A gradual change in all sorts of areas is what the logical outcome of that is, and there are a lot of changes, but we are being accused quite regularly as an industry, and I'm using this word perhaps a little bit too specifically, of not being innovative enough. But when I say that, I'm probably going to rally up a fair bit, because that's what you do over there. Are we being supported enough? Jackie came out with a number that we are only at 9% of the research and development budget that we had 20 years ago. Is that enough to really truly be innovative? Are we making all the wins that we should be making?
No, we're not making all the wins we should be making, and I agree with Jackie. We're probably not spending enough money, but I think there's a real I see a real change in that we're working together a lot more effectively.
Right.
So, I've only been with CSIRO for 3.5 years. And, 3 years ago, I talked to a company or my staff, and they talk about projects that they were doing, and they were real fee-for-service projects, some of them, not all of them. And I'd go, well, why are we doing this work? Or I'd say to the company, we're not interested in doing this work. We're interested in doing research and innovative work, so we may not deliver you what you're expecting, because we can't predict always what the outcome's going to be. We want to go on this journey with you. And we've got to the point now when we have those conversations with industry, they understand we're a research organisation, and they're coming to us because we're a research organisation, because they know that when they come to CSIRO, if they believe they're going to go to mine somewhere, say in 5 or 10 years, we can have solved a bunch of the problems before they get there. Right? So they'll know what their processing plant's going to look like. They may have other revenue streams coming in with their waste or whatever, okay, because that's not something my program can do, but it's something that other groups within CSIRO can get involved with. So we're seeing a lot more of that now. So I think that things will pick up in terms of R&D. We are seeing a lot more government funding going into R&D now than we around critical minerals, green steel, carbon abatement, that sort of thing. And we've just had a change of government here in Australia, and that may be driving some of those changes, although some of them, were already in play prior to the change. And that usually seeds other investment. So it usually seeds investment from companies into the market, that research and development market as well. So I'm quite hopeful in terms of that. Although we spent a lot more money years ago on R&D, were we focused enough with that R&D? Or were we just spending money on it? So we've got to the point now where we're quite focused on the R&D, on our expenditures, on what we're spending the money on. So maybe we're a little bit more efficient around it as well, and that puts us in really good stead going forward into the future.
Yeah, because the R&D budgets, and this is not really something I know a lot about, but there must be at country scale real competitiveness going on as well, and Australia haven't made all its fortunes in the iron ore industry. There must be reinvestment in the industry that's logical to make, and I'm not sure if it was Jackie or somebody else, but said that the R&D center of gravity is shifting more and more towards China, and the reason I'm mentioning that because at CSIRO there must be, and you talked about, I'm trying to weave a few things together, but you talked about collaboration, and if it's true research, then borders shouldn't really matter, right? We're all trying to innovate something. Do you have time, or do you have the team or people who focus on what other people are doing? Because going all the way back to the start when you talked about failures, other people learning from those failures is saves you all that time. And if you connect much better, which we do in 2022, then you should be able to so much more efficiently get to where we need to go collectively, right, at a real global stage. So yeah, a few questions in one there, but do you have people looking that, I mean, because that's all time investment without really any measurable input, people watching, going to conferences, listening to what other people do in the R&D space, connecting with people, meetings, more Teams meetings. There must be hard to get a gauge on that.
It's always going to be difficult to get a gauge on that, but our people are very connected into that global research sort of ecosystem. So they generally do understand what others are doing. When we get to a point where we want to invest internally, perhaps in taking an invention through to a technology, if you like, we actually have people in-house that can help us do a global scan, to see whether or not something's already out there or there's something similar that could be adapted. And so we don't repeat it if there is.
Yeah.
So we're very careful at that point. And that's actually where a lot of the money is. Taking something from a low technology readiness level to a high one is a long journey, and it's very expensive.
Yeah.
We do a lot of that. We also have within CSIRO a mechanism where we bid for future science platforms internally, and future science platforms are all about Horizon 3 science, so what we need in 5 years or 10 years' time. And there's quite a rigorous process around getting those up. So scans on what's been done globally, where the strong points are, where we could improve things perhaps. And even when they start the future science platforms, they'll then eke out, the directors of the future science platforms and their advisory committees will eke out where the best kind of bang for your buck's going to be in terms of the research going forward. So within those, we would commonly employ about 20 postdocs into future science platforms, and they're connected back into the business units and programs such as Discovery. And it's a real way of sort of getting that future science done for those future inventions or innovations as well. So we have a number of different mechanisms that we go through within CSIRO. I've never worked anywhere like CSIRO where it's so organised. And becoming more organised. But that's I think how we do it. Does that explain?
It does. And I'm truly just. I mean, a world I have no familiarity with, so I can ask all the stupid questions. But it must be. Just listening to that last bit, it must be really hard. You need some real future crystal ball PhDs who are like specialized in staring at a crystal ball and trying to work out whether something already exists, whether it actually technically is feasible, right? Whether it's got commercial applications to it, and then also who else might already be doing something like that. So that's a bit of a funky mix of variables that you have no control over. So and then I'd imagine somebody needs to set a budget, and somebody needs to talk about performance and outcomes and all those wonderful things that sit in government organization. I think it's fascinating because we just have clients and they want a product and we deliver it, and it's good. You go to the next client and we move on. I mean, I wouldn't call it a simple business, but in many ways, you got, and we've got plenty of variables and unknowns in clients, but it's a completely different world. That I've been there once for a couple of hours, and that's all the exposure that I've had to it. So it must be so 3 years. Yeah, it sounds like an exciting place to work for sure. Yeah, but that definitely explained it. What's so, you know, and I did sort of mix in what else is coming out, but I might not you know, go too deep on anything you're working on at the moment. But you know, going back to that question. So things like detect OR and I mean, we just had you know, photon assaying is quite a remarkable, you know, change to a very classically driven industry, part of the industry. But what should we be watching? I mean, what's out there and that we might not know of yet that is something to watch? Don't want to put you on the spot, but if nothing, that's also fine. But you know, innovation is really fun to watch, and yeah.
So I guess, so, you know, I want to tackle that in a couple of parts. So first of all, you mentioned photon assay, which is what Christos is a spin out from CSIRO.
Yep.
Has taken that out. That the reason I suspect one of the reasons why that's been so successful is that it's recognised by the JORC code, those analyses. So if we take that back a bit into what we were discussing earlier, and how do you get industry to take these things seriously, or to change the way we do things. One of the ways of doing that in the mine space is through the JORC code, is changing what's recognised in that JORC code, which is quite interesting because it's just been reviewed. I think last year they were reviewing that code. It was undergoing a review. In terms of
it's next year. Was supposed to come out this year. I'm a little bit involved with it, but that's volunteers trying to do something besides there.
I've seen some stuff, so we'll see what happens. But I guess in terms of what's coming next, it's just their decision support tools for exploration through cover is in my mind.
Yeah.
So we've got a bunch of data that's disconnected. So how do we connect that data? How, you know, is data fusion possible? Can we get more robust machine learning solutions out there with uncertainty around those models, for example? Mm-hmm. Can we really wrap uncertainty around our, say, depth of cover models? And we know we can, right? So those sorts of solutions are coming. You know, they're actually going to come out, you know, soon, hopefully, and people will be able to access them. Footprints to mineral deposits, that's always a big thing. So footprints are in the current cover, but also in the maybe the buried cover in terms of the interfaces within the regolith. Yeah. So using the regolith a little bit more systematically and in a smarter way. And also let's have a think about what our search spaces are. So we often talk about areas as being brownfields, but they're brownfields at the surface and down to 50 metres. Below that, they're just about greenfields. Mm. Okay, so how are we going to explore them? Because at some point you can't use the regolith anymore. So we have to use other means. So, you know, we have a project running at the moment called Indicator Minerals for basically nickel PGE type deposits. Mm-hmm. There are two aspects of that. One is in the resistate minerals that you get out of the regolith, and so the team are looking at that. And the other aspect is actually looking at the mafic, ultramafic bodies as well. So what subtle changes in the trace element geochemistry can we see within them that will point us towards a fertile zone? Mm-hmm. So there'll be more of that, you know, not just obviously nickel, but we'll be looking at other commodities as well in that as well. So that'll be part of the change. There's also a bunch of new satellites on board in terms of the hyperspectral satellites that are coming on, you know, that pass over our heads, basically, or where we pass under them or whatever. And the data coming off them is really interesting. So we'll see whether we can see anything else in them that we haven't been able to see elsewhere. And we do know that signatures get pumped up through that regolith, right, sometimes.
Yeah. So it's extremely useful,
It's extremely useful, and as structural geologists, we use it all the time, right? So we don't maybe understand how those signatures got there.
Yeah.
sometimes, or when that happened.
Yeah.
I guess in New Zealand it's so active that you can imagine it being pumped up now. But in Australia, we don't have an appreciation on actually how active our fault systems are. That you can see faults in the regolith. You can see that fluid must be moving through these zones. So just getting better at recognising those signatures and having better ways of, building decision support tools for industry around recognition of those signatures so that you don't have to be an expert to do it. So I think passing the data through a system so that people that are not experts can really use that data and understand why, the why behind they're seeing a particular signal is going to be really important. And that's what actually takes that out of that machine learning sort of path as well,
exactly.
because with ML, it's black box. You
Yep.
throw stuff in, you get a black box solution out. And most of the time, with most of the solutions that you will see, they're not even spatial because they're not using spatial machine learning methods. You don't really know where your signals come from in them. Whereas, within CSIRO, we're moving towards this spatial ML systems as well.
Okay.
So whatever we produce here and hopefully get out to everybody, we don't want them to be black box solutions, essentially.
Yeah, because you want for it to be reproducible, and if you want to put it in the hands of the masses without it going wrong, there's a few steps to conquer there. But and if it's just geochemistry data with signatures, then you can probably be fairly smart about that. In a way, data mosaic is a simple version of that, right? How can you take a bunch of data and get a pretty simple hierarchy out of something that your brain can understand, which is also a little bit the background behind that, the sort of machine learned prospectivity analysis as well, right? You reduce it down to some algorithms that are based on a systematic data approach. So it's and I agree. Obviously there are so many more opportunities in the data space. You get a little bit tired of either thinking about it or talking about it, but it is just true. We are so bad at dealing with all the data that we have. There got to be improvements there. So certainly watch that space.
Yeah, and we shouldn't beat ourselves up too badly because we're actually not that bad at dealing with that data, overall. But we're just not good at perhaps understanding all the dependencies or the relationships between them.
Well, that's what I mean. It's almost, I'm not just to clarify. It's not that we just we could do better at it. No human can interpret 15 data sets by just staring at them, right? There's got to be some sort of methodology behind that and then layering. I was talking to John Ronsky about this the other day, and he has his own sort of targeting approach that doesn't come out of the machine, and it's a real sort of specialist-driven, approach that doesn't resolve around 55 different layers and data crunching in a machine over a cup of coffee. So sorry, just to clarify, but you're right. Yeah,
and I'm with John on that as well. So I'm that sort of school. I actually think that my favourite prospectivity modelling method is still using a knowledge-based system, like using fuzzy logic, basically, because you're just putting the expert, I won't say it's me, but you're putting what you know into the machine, basically. You're telling the machine to do what your head is doing normally, but because the machine can see every pixel and you can't see every pixel, can read every pixel, it will bring up things that you may not have seen if you just looked over the data and laid things up. So that's why I like that method. I understand it. I know what's happened to the data. I know what the outcome actually means. But it works for me because I do understand it. But it doesn't work for everybody because they actually don't have that understanding of perhaps some of the data or the mineral system or whatever. I don't know what the answer is.
No. We could talk about it, and that's the fun thing about science. And the last time I circle back to the failures comment all the way at the start, because I do find that quite a sort of pivotal realization of research. Just because it failed once, in my mind, doesn't mean that it can't then work, because it isn't science across the world for the decades and eons, and isn't it a whole bunch of people trying to do the same thing, and there's this incremental movement of somebody adding a tiny little layer somewhere until suddenly somebody comes, Mr. Edison, with the light bulb and says, I found the final puzzle piece, right? Isn't that how the whole machine moves forward, right? It isn't one person starting in a corner and then discovering this thing without any prior knowledge, right? So these failures, we've got to appreciate them more, as you said, I really think, and put them out there, because that's exactly right. We in the mineral industry, and again, I don't want to indeed beat ourselves up too much over it, but I was talking about failures in resources and reserves estimation the other day, and it's a good example, because we don't really see why some of these projects failed. I mean, as a resource geologist, you just don't know why it failed. The share price crashed, and I have a few examples that I keep referring to, but these are the only 6 that I kind of know of, because it's all hush-hush. Nobody needs to go through the ringer, and the company will come up with some bland statement about something geology, blah, 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 but we don't really know and see what's gone wrong. And I find that really frustrating, because I want to learn from that. And the whole reason I got involved with the JORC code is not because I like studying 52 clauses of text as a structural geologist, but it is the only gateway to understanding the framework of what everybody else is doing, and under what framework they're doing and how they're reporting it, and some sort of structure to the chaos of what all these geologists do with their arm waving, and to see it going wrong, whether it's research and failures or whether it's resource models and so on. To me, that's a real key to research as well. Sorry, I just got on my soapbox a little bit, but...
No, that's true though. And I remember when I was working for Anglo, we used to complain about that as well, is that you never really understood why, for someone else's project didn't kind of make it through.
Even within companies like that, even within big companies, you don't see the mistakes from the otm mines. I mean, isn't that, it's a big company like Anglo, yeah.
Well, back then, I haven't worked there for a long time. I think we did go through a process where we did see some of those issues. So they were, but I was part of the global group, so we would look at, we'd look at everything together every now and then. So we would see that, but yeah, sometimes you just wouldn't really understand, and it's not worth the company to tell you why something failed, because they actually want to sell it to you.
Yeah.
And having said that as well, it may have failed for them because of that maybe the size wasn't good enough, or big enough, or whatever. But it may be a great success for somebody else down the track who cracks the nut around the processing, for example. And that we've seen that happen many times before.
Exactly.
So perhaps if the failures were out there, it would stop us from innovating further down the track, because we go, well, that doesn't work, that one, rather than going, well, we've got it now, we've got to make it work, because we just paid a bunch of money for it. So I don't know what the answer is.
No,
there'll be more open information, sort of more open file information. But the way that the reporting is structured is that we get some great data through exploration programs, because of the way things are set up. In Australia, I don't know how it works in New Zealand, but I imagine pretty similar.
Yeah, same code, same structure.
Yeah, so, within a certain number of years, data are released and all that kind of thing. And we can build on that, so it's really great. But once something goes to mine, when we don't need to see that information, we don't get that information anymore. Maybe that'll change down the track with responsible mining or something, like ESG types of things.
More disclosure,
Well, the companies might have to disclose stuff almost voluntarily, because they want to disclose all the good things they're doing as well as part of that. So if we go to carbon credits, or I don't know what we're going to do. Like I'm in the science agency. We don't make policy. we don't do anything around policy or anything. But you can imagine that things will change, I think. And so will companies disclose how they're capturing their carbon, or what they're doing to their nasty stuff that comes out, because they want some sort of credit. to show that they're doing a good job.
Well, you can definitely see that as a trend, because I talked about ESG with Bruce Harvey the other day, and it was really interesting to see that is a really fast-moving train. And I think there will be some collateral in that same space, and Jorg is already getting more into even further transparency, more detail about reporting. So I think if you project that forwards, there will come a day when that ultimate data accessibility will provide more opportunities. But that's a hard one to look into the future on. That's not for us.
Think about the data and getting data out. One of the problems with our machine learning models is that the data are not good enough, right? Yep. So no one's got enough data. We have a machine, an MLAI postdoc who's actually based in Queensland with Data 61, but she's working in with minerals. Yeah. And so when I meet her, she just says, your data are terrible. And our data's clean, it's been collected in the lab. We've just given, everything scanned with every different bit of equipment. There's SEM as well. It's all collated. Wow. It's beautiful. She goes, there's not enough data.
Yeah.
We go, oh my goodness. And so then we go, well, can we talk to a company about getting some data? She goes, and she'll have a look at some data. She goes, it's not good enough.
It's not good enough, no. And look,
it's not good enough data. You people, she says, you have terrible data.
Yeah. No, you're spot on, and that's a joke we have here as well. If and again, it's just hard to do because we work in a very practical industry. But if somebody says, no, our database is clean, I go, really? But I think she presented a nice paper at the Mining Geology Conference, I think, definitely understand, or she understand what she's talking about. And all the way back to the start, I can also see why you now or why you have an interest in English and arts, because you said data are, and that so people will appreciate that because you must be the champion report reviewer and get the red pen out with that background in English. That's
well, I don't ever correct that anymore because people don't look at it as plural.
Oh no, we had a client change it back to is in our report yesterday. Everything from are to is, they just said that's wrong. And anyway, that's where over a glass of wine. You
just have to let that one go.
But no, it's not a hill that I choose to die on. That's now. Look, Sandy, very nice to talk to you. I find it. I learned a lot, and thanks for the work that you do and contribute to the industry. This is really a bit of a quest, to find out how the industry moves forward and who's working in it and what we can do better. So really enjoyed your contributions. Anything else you want to share before I go home, because it's 6:30 and I think I'm late for dinner. Anything else on your mind?
No, all good. So thanks very much for the opportunity. It's been great sort of chatting to you.
Yeah, no, and I've got a few people coming to one of your sessions. I think, is it next week or very soon anyway, from our Perth office. So they'll come and say hi. But
that'd be great.
I'll next time in Perth we'll drop your line, say hi. But thanks so much, and see you at the next AGC meeting.
I'll see you then, and make sure you visit next time. We'll give you a tour.
Thank you. That would be lovely. Yeah, thanks, Annie. See you later.
See ya. Bye.